All right, we're going to talk about some important writers during the Neoclassic period in Europe. Now, because this started before the Restoration period in Europe and lasted until after England stopped paying attention to it, a lot of the most important writers of this period were European, and especially French, and some Spanish, but mostly French. Um, so we are going to talk a little bit about some of the English writers as well, but the most important writer of Neoclassicism is French, and that guy's name is Moliere. So Moliere is a really big deal in France. Moliere is in France what Shakespeare is in England. This writer that is just considered to be the most obviously greatest of all the writers, especially when we're talking about in the theater of France. Moliere basically could do no wrong. He wrote some things that kind of got him in some trouble because the Catholic Church was very powerful in there, and some of the things he wrote were kind of a bit offensive, and yet he continued to be popular. He was very different than Shakespeare, by the way. He was also very popular with courtiers and noblemen and stuff like this. He had a lot of pull. He was also well known to be an actor during the time when he was writing as well. Shakespeare was an actor as well, but it seems from most of the records that we have that once he started writing, he kind of stopped acting, except for in very small parts. Moliere didn't. He usually would write a play, and then he would play the main character. So he was, in fact, he died on stage. He got very, very sick and was like coughing and stuff like that. And he was in a play called The Doctor in Spite of Himself, or The Imaginary Invalid, or something, or one of these things, where his character was supposed to be a hypochondriac that always thought he was sick and dying. And he was on stage and he was coughing up blood, and people thought it was still part of the show. And him, as a great actor, he just continued acting, and he acted all the way through there and then stumbled off the stage and died. So amazing actor, amazing writer. And I could talk about lots of his plays. His plays, in a lot of ways, were Neoclassicism in France. People looked at him and said, that is the kind of plays, those are well-made plays. The play we're going to talk about is called The Misanthrope. Now, this is a great word to try to bring into popular usage again. A misanthrope is a person that just can't seem to get along with anybody. He just seems to like not that he's like contentious and fighting with people, but he just doesn't seem to, just very antisocial with anybody around there. And The Misanthrope is a play about a character named Alceste who is a misanthrope. So the main character in The Misanthrope is this guy. His name is Alceste. And Alceste starts off the play by talking to his friend, and he tells him that society is filled with hypocrites and flatterers and people that just never tell the truth about anything, and he can't stand being around them. And his friend tries to tell him, look, you need to be polite. You need to be polite to people and tell them lies, let them know that, you know, that they're not so bad, because otherwise they're not going to stand being around you. And Alceste says, no, it's better for us to be honest. It's better for people to tell the truth, even if the truth is something that'll hurt people's feelings. And his friend kind of can't argue with him because Alceste is filled with honesty, but he knows it's going to cause him some trouble. Into this steps this woman named Silhamine. Now, Alceste knows that Silhamine represents everything that bothers him about society. She is flirtatious, she is coquettish, she's always flattering people, always saying nice things about people that she doesn't mean. And yet, Alceste can't stop loving her. He just thinks she's just wonderful. She's probably just very, very good looking. In any case, though, he's all flirtatious with her, and he wants her to stop being such a liar and start being a little bit more honest with him. And she's like, oh yes, I probably should, because you're so smart, you're so wise, I should do as you say. And she is also flattering him, and he doesn't kind of catch that. In the middle of this steps forward this guy named Oronte. Now, Oronte is a fop, by which I mean he's a guy that is good with the court and not much good for much else.
And he has written a poem. So he's got a little poem in his hand saying, hey, I have written a sonnet and I think it is wonderful. Would you listen to it and tell me what you really think? And all the people around are listening to him, and he reads the poem out loud, and it's terrible. It's supposed to be a terrible poem. But Silmaine and others say, oh, bravo, well done, well done. He says, and what about you, Alceste? What do you think? He says, boy, did that suck. You should never write poetry. You're a terrible, terrible poet. How terrible you are to say such things. He's like, well, you asked for me to say the honest truth. The honest truth is you're awful, and you terribly, terribly should never write poetry. He said, I will get revenged upon you, and Oronte is mad at him for this. Meantime, Alceste is continuing to flirt with Silmaine, and Silmaine is continuing to be very coquettish and flirtatious and won't make any promises. Along the way comes other women that do like Alceste a lot, including this woman, Arsinoe. Arsinoe is a bit of a prude, but she really respects Alceste for his honesty and for his courage. And she lets him know, so you really need to stay away from Silmaine. Silmaine is no good for you. She will not make you happy. He's like, well, I don't care. I love her anyway. In the middle of this, Oronte has basically made a lawsuit against Alceste. I've been looking up trying to find exactly what he's charging him for. As far as I can tell, he's bringing him to law for saying mean things about his poem, which seems weird to me since he asked him to say the truth about it, but there it is. In any case, he's going to go to court and he's going to lose because, you know, he did say mean things about his poem and everybody heard him say mean things about his poem. But he's saying, I will drop all the charges, but first, what do you really think about my poem? Now, he could go ahead and just lie and say, well, it's actually quite good and I was just jealous or something like this, but he won't do it. He continues to say the truth, that he hated this poem and his poem was garbage. And so he's decided he's going to, he charges him, he loses his lawsuit, and he's going to lose a lot of money out of it, and he decided he's just going to leave town altogether. And he kind of wants Silmaine to come with him, but Silmaine's like, oh yes, perhaps I shall, I don't know, we're not quite sure about that, and she's still being very flirtatious. Into this, Arsinoe comes up and says, I have proof that you should not be with Silmaine. And she shows him some letters. And he looks at them and says, yes, I recognize these letters. These are letters that Silmaine wrote to me about her love. Why? How did you get a hold of them? She says, no, no, no. These are letters that Silmaine wrote to this other guy. And here's some more that she wrote to another guy. And here's some more that she wrote to a fourth guy. And here's some that she wrote to Oronte. So she's been writing the same kind of flirtatious letters to lots of different guys. Now again, it's not like she's sleeping with them, so it's not like she's being sluttish, but she is being flirtatious to everybody. Arsinoe has proof of it, and she knows that Alceste won't be happy about this. Alceste is very unhappy about this, but he still can't help loving her. And he basically turns down Arsinoe, and then Alceste comes to Silmaine and says, Silmaine, I know what you did. I've got all this evidence of all of these writers and stuff like this. But I will forgive you if you will now come with me. I am going to exile myself away from society. Society is filled with liars and false flatterers, and I'm going to exile myself away from them. If you will come with me, we will be happy together. Now at this point, Silmaine needs to answer him. She's been just kind of putting him off and being polite. At this point, she needs to answer him. He basically backs into a corner that says she needs to either say yes or no. And so she finally drops a lot of the flirtatious pretense and speaks frankly and says, no. I am young, I am beautiful, I like society, I'm good at it. I'm good at being in society, and I am too young and beautiful to forsake society and go off with you. I wish you'd change your mind, but no, I'm not coming with you. And then she leaves him, and he is very, very upset about this, and he decides he is going to leave society all on his own, and so he goes off and leaves society. And the play kind of ends with, actually not Arsinoe, but another woman that liked him, who ends up falling in love with his friend that he talked to before, and they decide, you know what, we've got to go get Alceste and try to convince him to come back to society. And they're leaving off to try to convince him, and that's pretty much where the play ends.
So Moliere was probably the biggest name during this time period. Going back to England, though, by the time, like I said, they were a little late to the party. By the time they started getting into neoclassicism, Moliere was already dead. And they were able to look at some people that tried to kind of make the same kind of plays that he did, but none of them were particularly important. But there was one person from their past that they looked at and said, this guy is almost as great as Moliere was. And that guy's name was Ben Jonson. Now, we talked about Ben Jonson back in Theatre Arts 1. Ben Jonson was a writer during Shakespeare's day. And much like Moliere and like the neoclassics, he had studied and he had seen those books by Aristotle, and he believed that he knew the proper way to write a good play. And he wrote a bunch of plays like that. His plays followed the rules of neoclassicism mostly. And the neat thing about it is that he was writing before those rules of neoclassicism had really been set down. So a lot of, and I'm not going to talk about his particular plays because we talked about them in Theatre Arts 1. So yeah, when we get to the test, you will not need to know a play that Ben Jonson wrote, but I do want you to know that he was a playwright that the English could look at and say, look, 100 years ago, we had this guy, Ben Jonson, and he was following these rules. And his plays started becoming very, very popular when England started, like I said, a little late to the party, but they started getting into neoclassicism. All right, so anyway, that is the two neoclassic writers that I want you to know about. Next time, we're going to talk about what happened afterwards. A lot of neoclassicism has kind of gone away. Like I said, some of the rules can still work in certain plays and in certain ideas, but the idea that this is the only way to make a play has kind of gone away. But the next thing we're going to talk about is something that has continued. It's changed a little bit, but it's continued, and it's still pretty much around today. In any case, though, we're going to stop that right there, and I will talk to you again the next time that we're together.